welcome to Goodness Gracious. Thanks for joining again. I'm trying a new camera angle today, so hopefully this one works a little bit better. Today I'm super excited for our first attempt at pastry dough. That we're actually going to play with today is a cream cheese pastry. It's delicious. It's super creamy and rich and decadent. And we're going to be using it for one of Otto Lange & Go's recipes. They are my absolute favorite. I did a bit of a blog last year going through the recipes in their baking book called Sweet. Highly recommend that you get the book. It's fantastic. It's one of my favorite recipe books. So later on we're actually going to be using the cream cheese pastry for a delicious blueberry rhubarb galette. I'm pretty lucky because in my market locally, I actually just found some beautiful, bright red fresh rhubarb. And then we'll throw together a lovely fruit-based galette. Super versatile. If you don't have rhubarb and blueberries, don't worry at all. You can use basically any fruit. So any type of berry that you may have, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries would be really nice. You could use apricots, peaches. You could even do an apple galette if that's what you've got. Anyway, now it's time for us to make our cream cheese pastry dough. What we're going to do today is a typical hand-based mixing process, which is actually pretty standard and something that a lot of pastry schools will teach their students as one of their kind of pastry 101 classes. So it's very typical, and it's great to know how to make pastry by hand. So for the cream cheese based pastry, I'm going to attempt to make something that would be similar to a flaky pastry consistency so that you get flakes on this. So as I move closer here, I have my sifted and whisked dry ingredients. This is flour along with a tiny bit of baking powder, which is interesting for a pastry dough. Usually you don't see a leavening agent like that, but just a tiny bit, as well as some salt. So that's already pre-mixed and pre-sifted. Then we have chilled, so very important and different when you consider like comparing this to a cookie or a cake recipe. That's all usually room temperature. This stuff is chilled. Really important for pastry dough. And you want to make sure, so you'll notice that these have been cut into chilled tiny cubes. Then I have chilled cream cheese, fresh out of the fridge. I also cut them into little chunks. Cream cheese obviously has like a very soft consistency, so it's a bit different when you're working with cream cheese versus butter. So that's our cream cheese. Then I also have a little tiny bit, so this is 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar is super versatile. It adds a nice bit of acidity to a lot of cake recipes, which of course, as we've talked about before, leavening agents, right? This would react to a baking soda in a cake recipe, but this is pastry. And the reason we are using apple cider vinegar in a pastry-based recipe is to actually shorten the gluten strands in our protein structure, because we want a really soft, lovely, flaky pastry. And so that's what the vinegar does. The other thing that adds a bit of creaminess, moisture, and helps as well with the shortening of the gluten strands is hopefully you actually have some heavy cream. I don't. I'm currently in my fridge, so I'm just using whole milk. This is about 2.5 tablespoons of whole milk. The recipe calls for 2 to 3, so I thought that I'd go right in the middle. The other thing I have on my table, in terms of my setup before I get started, is a little bit of table flour. So this is just a container that I've kept for months and months. It has some all-purpose flour in it. And I just, every time I'm doing pastry or anything that requires a table, so bread as well, I take this out and I keep it at my station because I'm gonna grab this anytime I need to flour the station or the dough. Just make sure if you have like multiple containers like this of flour to label them, but I don't, this is my only one. So the other thing I have over here that I used already for my butter and my cream cheese is of course my dough cutter. Super key anytime you're making pastry. All right, so we're gonna get started because this stuff is getting a little bit close to room temperature as we go, and we wanna keep it nice and cold. So I'm just tossing a nice bit of flour down before I so I'm taking my dry. The first thing I'm gonna do, again, this already has the salt and baking powder whisked into it, so that it's fully combined, I'm going to pop my butter chunks nice and cool into this mixture, right into the bowl. And now with your hands, so I'm taking the butter chunks and quickly, so because you do not want this butter to get too warm. You don't want it to melt, you want it to stay nice and cool. I'm squishing the butter and rubbing it into the dry. And don't worry about keeping big chunks. As long as everything ends up, so you can even rub like this. Sometimes people prefer that. But I'm just squeezing and rubbing really quickly all the pieces of butter into my dry. This is very similar. A lot of people make biscuits this way. So that's cool. There you go. See? Kind of sandy, but then there are still some pretty big chunks of butter left in here. That's fine, especially at this point, because next we are adding the cream cheese and we're basically doing the same thing. So cream cheese is a bit of a different consistency. It's super sticky, so you're gonna wanna just sort of tear the cream cheese apart into little pieces the best that you can first before you start rubbing everything else together. See, it looks like that now with the cream cheese added. Now we're gonna add, of course, our last bit. So in goes the cream or whole milk, nice and cold, as well as the vinegar. Now, I'm just getting in there with one hand. This is when it starts to get a little messy and why you're gonna be happy that you've already partially floured your station, because you don't really want to be touching your flour with this hand. Okay, this is, coming together so easily. So I'm gonna pour this onto the table now. Get rid of all of your containers. So, sink if you want. So sticky. Okay, good. Now, you don't want to over knead this. This is not a bread, right? Right now, all we're doing very quickly is we're going to be basically pushing everything together. You'll notice it looks like a dough already, right? I could really stop, to be honest, because the more you work a pastry dough, the tougher it's going to get. You don't want that. So I think I'm just gonna like fold it over once, maybe twice, just to make sure that everything is fully combined. Oh yeah, that's fine. I'm going to very quickly cover this in plastic wrap tightly, and then I'm going to chill this for at least 45 minutes, if not longer. It'll keep for a day or two very nicely. Any longer than that, then the cream cheese actually will change the color a little bit of your dough, which is kind of, it's not really super appetizing. So that's it, that's the dough. So once this is chilled, I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna show you how to roll this out to make our galette. Welcome back. My pastry dough, my lovely cream cheese pastry dough, has fully chilled. It's been a few hours actually for me in the fridge, and I took this out of the fridge approximately 10 minutes ago just to let it soften ever so slightly to make it a bit easier to roll out. Because as many of us probably know, as soon as you take out rock hard pastry dough from the fridge, it's impossible to roll, or it's quite the workout. It's a workout no matter what you do, really. So that's ready to go. My oven has also been preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. I also have a pan that I'm gonna show you in a moment. I've got my rolling pin out. This is super heavy. It is made of marble, so cannot drop this on my feet because that would really, really hurt a lot. It's great though because it is heavy and it is super, super smooth, so I like using it. I actually found this one again in a thrift store, so you never know. A lot of people give up like baking tools, so go to thrift stores when we can again. They are so great for things like this. And the other things that we have ready to go. So this is a mixture of a bunch of dry stuff for the base. So this is going to be going on as a layer sprinkled once we actually get the pastry dough fully rolled out and placed onto the prepare pan. And this is a combination of almond flour, because I didn't have amaretti cookies. That's what the recipe calls for. But I love Ottolenghi and Go recipes because they often will come up with cool substitutions or suggestions for things. So instead of amaretti cookies, you can easily use almond flour. Almond flour, a little bit of cornstarch, a little bit of flour, cinnamon, so a full teaspoon of cinnamon, just a dash of salt, and that's pretty much it. So it'll give it hopefully a nice little almondy flavor to the base, and it also absorbs all of the moisture that's coming from your fruit filling. Then I also have egg wash. This will be the last step before it goes into the oven. It's just a whole egg and a little bit of whole milk. I like the combination of milk and egg for all of my egg washes. It just creates a really, really lovely golden brown. We of course have the fruit filling stuff. So I've got a full tablespoon of cornstarch to help thicken the filling up a little bit. Also absorbs a little bit of moisture. This is a bit of granulated sugar, of course. And it's super simple. So these two key ingredients are so, so beautiful. So I'm lucky because I did find these again at my local market, fresh blueberries. I think these are imported because it's not blueberry season right now, but they still look pretty beautiful and I've tested them. Always test the fruit that you're going to be baking with. Sometimes it does change a little bit in a bake, but still, you want it to taste good, right? Going in there. And then this is a pretty cool ingredient. It inspired me to make this today. It's fresh rhubarb. So I had no idea that it was rhubarb season in BC. Who knew? It's fun things about moving to new places. So I'm used to Ontario springs, and we definitely don't have anything like this yet. And it's got such a beautiful color. So really excited to try this. What I did, I actually picked these up yesterday. You do typically want to bake or cook with them the day that you buy them because they don't last very long. But if you do need to store them for a little bit, just plop them in some water. Maybe cut up the bases too, because sometimes the bases are kind of gross and you want to let in as much water as possible, and they stiffen right back up. I of course also have my bench flour here. So just some all-purpose, I'll put that down. Plop that in the middle of your workspace. Hopefully you have enough room too, because we want to roll this out pretty thin, 3 millimeters thickness. So it takes a while. Okay, and this is how we do it. So more flour on top. Also pastry 101 when you go to school. See how this rolls. So because it's just starting, it'll need a little bit of help to get going. Okay, 1. Don't rip it. Don't apply too much pressure. Just move. Collect a bit of flour underneath. Next side. Just like 1 or 2 rolls. I'm just going nice and slow to show you. Next side. From the middle out, but don't squish the edge. Middle out. More flour. You can collect it right from other parts of your workstation. Middle out. Try to get this as even as you can, and it's really important at this point, because we're almost done, to not squish the edges, right? It's easy to flatten out the edges and like make that part a little bit thinner than anywhere else, and you don't want that. Nice. So before I put it on the pan, I'm just gonna do a bit of a trim just of the rough stuff. So taking a nice small sharp knife, very carefully, don't take off too much. Remember, galettes are supposed to be rustic. I'm gonna be using my silicone baking mat, which is so versatile and wonderful. Love this thing. Ooh, yeah, it should fit. It doesn't look like it's going to, but it will. So, and I'm gonna carefully, and hopefully evenly, the cream cheese pastry is really nice to work with. It's so soft. It's okay if it hangs over the edges because we're gonna be wrapping this, right? Good, just try to make it nice and centered. And I'm just gonna sprinkle this on. Remember, looking for the edge of the pan. You just want it to kind of create your circle. Think about, so something else, right? You're going to be folding this over, so don't go too far out. See how much of the Galette bottom I'm actually covering? It's probably less than you would expect, right? Now, I'm going to toss my filling together. There goes the rhubarb, my blueberries, my sugar, and my cornstarch. You don't want chunks of cornstarch, so sometimes it is a good idea to actually sift that. Okay. I'm just mixing this together with my hands so that there's a nice even coating of the cornstarch and sugar. Put that right in the middle. Ah, I'm losing some blueberries. They do like to roll away. I'm just gonna make sure that it's sort of even. Beautiful. Some of my rhubarb pieces are so funny. Okay. Then you just kind of fold pieces, like not fully over, I would, yeah, like that. Fold again. And it's okay to fold over and over like that. Right. Fold, Gonna try to hide some of the, yeah, like that. Folding, I think one more, eh? Oh, there. This is so picky. Gotta get the flaps going the right way, right? Okay. So no lattices involved in this, super rustic. There we go. Okay, so this is going in the oven. It'll probably take about 40 minutes, and halfway through I'm going to rotate it so that the golden hue on the outside is even, hopefully, all the way around. And then I will check in with you later once this is baked. All right, so my galette is now out of the oven. You can see it here. I'll very carefully try to tilt it towards the camera. I'm really happy with how it turned out before actually tasting it. It's nice and golden from our lovely egg wash that we applied, and shiny. And it's a nice brown, so that is how you know it is finished as well when you're looking at it in the oven. Be careful, because it is so tempting sometimes to take pies or tarts or anything like that out of the oven too early. When you start to see some golden, that's great. It means the bake is coming along, but it's not done yet. Make sure you wait until the entire thing is golden. It's okay if you get a little bit of darker crust. It actually adds a bit of depth to the flavor, in my opinion anyway. And then you're going to ensure that the bottom is actually baked all the way through. That's what you want. And we know that this is done properly because I was actually able to, all in one piece without breaking it at all, take it off of the pan and onto this cutting board. So, here we are. Do you hear that crunch? That is a sign of a flaky pastry. Okay, there it is. All in one piece. Miraculous. It's also really visually beautiful, right? With the blueberries and the rhubarb. It's such a deep purple, basically. It smells good. Okay, so I have my fork here. Let's give this a taste test. Even the bottom is crispy. Hooray. The rhubarb is tart. It's more tart than I was expecting biting into it, but it's lovely. And I'm actually so glad that I chose to go with the original combination of the blueberry and rhubarb. A lot of people use strawberry. That would also be delicious here. Blueberries are just, they're so sweet. And they balance out the tartness of the rhubarb really, really well. It's an interesting combination, yeah. Very, very good. And the crust is flaky. I actually don't use cream cheese crust very often. This might be my new go-to. We'll have to see. Yeah, it has a nice creaminess to it, and that flake is incredible. See the bottom? It's exactly like on top. That's what you want. Very happy with how that turned out. Definitely more tart than I was expecting, but if you like a lemon curd based dessert, this will be right up your alley. Rhubarb is a fantastic fruit, or I suppose it's a vegetable, that is not used very often. So yes, please try this recipe by Odo Lengi and Go. It's from the recipe book Sweets. It's one of my favorites. It should be yours too. It's the blueberry and rhubarb galette. I hope you really enjoyed this video and the new angle that we have here today for you. And I hope that you learned a little bit about pastry. So please let me know what you think of this video, and if you make this galette or another version of this with different fruits, please share. I'd love to hear about that. Thanks for watching. Goodness gracious.